Hey everyone, my name is Jason Filer, and I'm excited to welcome you to episode 5 of the Afterglow. In this series, I'll be interviewing big names in the barbershop harmony world to try and figure out the stories behind their music that we love so much. For this episode, I'm very excited to have on 2024 Barbershop Harmony Society International Quartet Contest semifinalists, Praxis.
You got a list that's 3 miles long, no doubt, so all you gotta do is rub like so. Whoa! On that insert, have a wish or two or three. I'm on the job, you ain't never had a friend, never had a friend, had a friend.
Renowned for their blend of the traditional barbershop style with contemporary flair, Praxis has captivated audiences with performances of extremely intricate arrangements that push the boundaries of the barbershop style. As we sit down with these 4 talented individuals, we'll explore their musical inspirations, uncover the stories behind their standout performances and arrangements, and gain insight into their creative process. So, there's no reason to wait any longer. Let's find out what really sets this group apart. It's Kevin, Francesco, Lance, and David. It's Praxis. Praxis, how are you? Thank you for being here.
Doing great.
We're well.
Woo! How are you, Jason?
Awesome. I'm doing awesome. This is a pleasure for me, a pleasure for the audience. I am a huge fan of your group, so this is really fun for me to be able to be a part of this. Let's just jump right into it. So we'll just talk about, I'd love for each of you to just talk a little bit about how you got into barbershop, from the beginning, and then how you sort of were led toward this group of people. So David, how about we'll start with you? How did you get into barbershop?
It's a really, really long story. So if people want the uncut version, come find me at conventions. But it's crazy. But the end result was I just went on this brand new website at the time called YouTube.com, and I looked up Barbershop Quartet. And the first video that popped up was what I later found out was from Platinum's 2001 AIC set of them singing Once Upon a Time, the Keepsake song, because Gary's favorite quartet at the time was Keepsake. So that, 30 seconds into that, I was like, oh, I need to do this forever. And here I am.
Awesome. That's not a bad performance to start with to see for the first time. Yeah. All right, Lance, how about you?
Yeah, so my first barbershop function, I was brought in by a music educator to an event called Harmony College East, which is it's really funny because that's an event that we've sung on the last 2 years. And so I went to the show, and lo and behold, I saw quartets like Gimme 4, GQ, Round Midnight, all these groups that now we're seeing on the international stage. I just saw them as, oh, they're groups from the Mid-Atlantic District of Barbershop. And I left the show feeling like, that was a pretty good show. I probably won't do that again, but, it seems pretty cool. But then Ben Hawker of Proud Street Power taught me my first tag. And I left that evening at 2 a.m. after singing my last tag of the evening. So, what brought me in was exactly what I care about, which is tag singing, and they after the show is over, convention culture really is what brought me into barbershop.
If I may
Awesome.
interject,
Yes,
Ben
please.
Hawker left this house at 5 a.m. this morning after singing tags. So we're all still doing that.
Yep.
That's awesome to hear. Fran, how about you?
Well, I had seen The Music Man a few times growing up. There was a production of it that got put on by my high school theater group a few years before I entered high school. So this would have been when I was probably in 7th or 8th grade. And but I still hadn't really the barbershop bug hadn't really bitten me by that point. And then a few years later, I was at the NAFME All National Chorus in Washington, D.C. And we stayed, we were assigned hotel rooms with people who, other members of the chorus. And I was assigned to be with this other guy from Long Island, New York, because that's where I originally am from. I live in Massachusetts now, but I grew up on Long Island. And he was also from Long Island, but I never really had met him and spent much time with him prior to this convention in June of 2012. and we were talking about music. We were in our room. We were talking about what were the ideal qualities of a perfect genre of music. And by that point, I had already sort of had a list of qualities in my head about like what a perfect genre of music would be like. And lo and behold, I'm not going to bore, I'll spare you the details, but it turned out, without me really knowing it, that I had articulated the structural characteristics of barbershop harmony pretty much to a T, all the way down to like a prevalence of dominant seventh chords, that level of specificity, 4-part harmony, a cappella, this sort of thing, close chromatic harmony. And so he was like, so have you heard of barbershop? And I said, yeah, I've seen The Music Man, but I didn't really know. I didn't think that it was still a surviving art form, to be frank, and I didn't know people were doing it. And he played me the Gas House Gang singing "Bright Was the Night."
Wow.
And that was it. I mean, literally, that was it. I don't remember where he went, but I remember that same night listening to that song on YouTube. So he had played me the album cut, but I went and looked up on YouTube the 1992 silver medalist cut of them doing that, and getting second place with it from the international contest. And I remember watching that video over and over and over and over and over and over and over, and listening to the tag, listening to the tag, listening to the tag, listening to the tag, going back to the chorus, to the end, tag, 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 back to the beginning, all the way. So just for like 2 hours, just sort of really sitting with it and just being like, whoa. I went home from that convention, and I, very poorly, in retrospect, wrote out all 4 parts to that arrangement. And at that point, it was, the bug had bitten me, and I spent like the next year or so kind of just researching barbershop on my own. I didn't know anyone. I went to visit my first chapter meeting some months later, and it was your classic. It wasn't like a chapter that was winning district by any means. It was some guys were walking in there with, oxygen tanks and tubes in the nose. This is the kind of chapter that this was. And it was a blast. It was so much fun. They took care of their guests, and I was like, man, being in a chapter must be pretty awesome. And then I went that was between junior and senior year. I did my senior year of high school, and then I went to Boston for music school at Boston University, joined my first chapter immediately, which was the Vocal Revolution chapter in the Northeastern District. Now, their chapter name is the Greater Boston Chapter, and they're still Vocal Revolution, and they're directed by my roommate, Kai Outerbridge, who is in the other room right now. So at that point, I've been a barbershopper for 11 years now, and it wasn't until, like, how did we meet? So I remember you asking a few minutes ago, how did we meet, and how did I start hanging out with the guys on this call? It's because of a chorus called East Coast Sound, which brought me into the Mid-Atlantic District. They are a chorus. I mean, I'm still a member. They were a youth chorus that went to the Midwinter Convention every year for the youth festival, and I joined them for the 2016 Reno festival in the beginning of the year in 2016. And from that point on, I joined the chapter. I've been going to do, I'm part of the music team, and I go to conventions. And it was through that I met David and Lance, mostly Lance at that time, and then David a couple of years later. Actually, no, it might have been the same year, doing some other tag stuff in North Carolina. So it wasn't until a bit later after that I had met Kevin, mostly through David, bringing connecting the two of us together. So sort of long-winded, but that's how I got into barbershop, and that's how I met these fine folks here.
Awesome.
Can you mention the part about peeling paint?
Oh yeah, the first time I met David Breen, he had just come off the contest stage with Midwest Standard in 2015.
Correct. The baritone of whom was?
Kevin Clark. And the first thing I ever said to David was, "You guys peeled paint." meaning because they were very loud and they sang fairly in tune. And it was good. It was good. I remember being backstage going because we were in a I was in a quartet in the youth contest called the Reunion at the time, and we were being led around backstage. We had entered the back of the performance hall while Miss Midwest Standard was on the stage, so we got to hear the whole back of the performance hall where all the equipment and lighting and ropes and all the backstage stuff is filled with the sound of this quartet, sort of muffled, but still like I was like, okay, who's that? And I looked up on the order. And it was Midwest Standard. So I was like, these guys are good. So that's when I remembered that, and I told David later, yeah, you guys peeled paint.
A funny part about this quartet is kind of, we're kind of the next generation, I guess. Like was Harmony Foundation Youth Contest, was Collegiate Contest. It's had a lot of name changes over the years, but we've all been through kind of the what is now the next gen circuit. We were all in different quartets, kind of cycled through. Like I knew David and Kevin because I was in a quartet called Tradition that competed in 2017, and the group below us was the Millennial Falcons. Lo and behold, Kevin Clark, David Breen are in that quartet, and I knew those names. I didn't see the faces, but then I saw the Millennial Falcons. I'm like, I love this quartet. But then I saw the Reunion, which had Francesco, obviously. He alluded to that earlier. And I just knew these guys as like, oh, they're part of the next-gen kind of family, etc. And eventually, when it came time, I was available to sing in a quartet after, singing in a bunch of different quartets. I thought of people I wanted to sing with, and I wanted to sing with Francesco. And then we started singing together, and we sang in a quartet called Jefferson Plaid Tie, who is the first quartet to ever tie and get second place in international quartet contest. It's a very fun stat that we love and hate at the same time. And
my silver.
Yeah, I love my silver.
It's the prettiest medal.
Those of us not in just Jefferson plaid tie call the circumstance of losing in a tie a Jefferson plaid tie.
Yeah.
Because a Jefferson plaid tie does not exist in the real world.
Does not.
It's a fake pattern. There's a Jefferson stripe.
Yep.
But there's not a Jefferson plaid. So it's a fake name.
So the split off of Jefferson Plaid Tie was Praxis. It was almost immediately after we got together for our first rehearsal. So it's a really nice tie-in to the quartet that we were just in, to jump into a even crazier quartet situation.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Well, let's go back to Kevin. How about you? Just how did you get into it? How did all that stuff come about?
Yeah, so my first exposure was in high school. We tried to put together a quartet that never performed. We kind of had 5 members, and then 3, and it was weird. But a local barbershopper, her name was Joan Simonis, kind of put us together. It was cool. So I heard Gas House was my first experience as well. It was the Elements version of the Animaniacs song. It was cool. Yeah, and then I went to Bowling Green for college, where I eventually met David. But before that, I was in the men's chorus there, and they had varsity quartets every year that are involved with the chorus. So I tried out for that. I got placed in one, and it was cool. I didn't know what I was doing barbershop wise. I was just on lead, so it was the best fit for somebody who didn't know what they were doing. Yeah, and then did a couple youth quartets that did very badly. Eventually, yeah, we didn't. Millennial. I mean, it was fine because we were all like so new. It was so fun. We met like the con men way back then. They were the old guys for sure. And then, yeah, Millennial Falcons. And then in 2018 was Florida, right?
Yeah, it was Orlando. That's actually where Kevin and I loosely met. We sang on the risers of the Next Gen chorus.
Right.
Right next to each other. We didn't really talk a whole lot, but I knew you were in Roses and Blue, and they did really well. They were 4th place, so it was really awesome.
Yeah, and I was always like, damn, Kevin's such a good lead. Ever since like for the last 10 years, literally.
Yeah, that was the first time I heard the Reunion as well, and I was telling David, like, do you hear them? Like, I, in my non-knowledge, was like, they should have a medal. I agreed.
I strongly agree. Like in 17, also, like before then, I thought reunion and tradition should have been in the medals. Um, there was something that I wanted to take. Oh, and it's gone. I wanted
Lance
to
Youth
elaborate on
Contest.
something.
Orlando.
Yeah,
Orlando 2018.
Youth Contest leads.
Reunion.
Roses
I mean,
again.
I'll say a different thing about Orlando. Kevin and I and our friend Kathleen road tripped to Orlando from Ohio, which
Wow.
was not the first time Kevin and I road tripped to a very far away international from Ohio. The year before, we had driven to Vegas from Ohio, and that was like, what, 30 hours, 34 hours? Uh,
That was a
No,
yeah.
no shot, no shot, dude.
Kevin and I had
Wow.
spent a lot of time together.
for sure.
It's fun. I wish I knew about barbershop in 2018. I'm in Miami, so that would have been a much easier one for me than the past ones, but I would have made the road trip for sure, but not anymore. Cool. Well, that's some really good info, and I mean, we got to hear also a lot about how you guys came together, so that's pretty cool. I'm wondering, just a little bit of a smaller question, but where did the name come from? If anyone has a particular knowledge about the
Oh
start of the
man.
name.
Okay, so uh, we were brainstorming. So Lance and I lived together from the fall of 21 to fall of 22, and when the quartet B and B, uh, when their tenor left, John Cifuentes, they asked me to sing baritone and for Lance to switch up to the tenor part, and that lasted for like a rehearsal and a half before the bass quit, and then we asked Kevin because this quartet had already been planning on doing Johnny Appleseed District just for fun as a side thing. But then when we got the sense of yeah, this is going to be a real thing. Yeah, we can make this the main competition thing. We thought, okay, we got to come up with a name that actually fits and isn't stupid like the one we were going to use. So Lance and I driving up to East Coast Sound, usually to see Francesco, but we competed with them in Charlotte in 22, and Fran was usually there, so we would be able to brainstorm more about basically just the name. And we had several placeholder names, one of which on the drive, and it was like a 3.5 hour drive for me and Lance to come from Columbia, Maryland to Caldwell, New Jersey. So we had ample time back and forth every time. But we drove to a show one time, um, and along the route, like maybe 7 minutes from the venue, we stopped at an intersection, and the oblique road was called Street Road, and we're like, all right, we're gonna call us that for now because that's just hysterical.
Street Road was it was a long time that we were called Street Road.
That was the name for like 5 months.
Yeah, it was literally 5 months of Street Road.
And 2020 was such a wild year because
Bro.
David and I sang in 3 chapters that,
3.
and all of which we sang on the international stage. I sang in another quartet. It was the longest week of my life.
And so whose idea was it for Praxis? It just came to us, right?
No, that was me.
It was a convo.
So we had talked about a few Solid State had come up, but that didn't have much meaning behind it. Entendre came up, but that didn't have quite the right zhuzh to it, and also who's going to pronounce entendre correctly every time. So we were going to the Afterglow spot for East Coast Sound, the three of us, and we were still brainstorming names. And I had remembered a Facebook comment I had made to Francesco. So Mason Eubank had commented on one of Francesco's multi-track videos, just jokingly saying, "Dude, how are you so good?" But like in a meme sort of tone. And Francesco writes this diatribe of, well, actually, this is how I'm so good. And he went into the concept of the state of flow, and something that he talked to me a lot about, that a cross section of every moment needs to be interesting and engaging. So to get into the state of mind to be in that engagement the whole time so that you can isolate and be engaged. That is the overarching framework. So the concept of state of flow as it pertains to musical practice, we're getting to Praxis. Um, I commented in response, and if you want some praxis with your theorizing, here is a performance that perfectly demonstrates, in my opinion, musical flow from start to end. And so I remembered that comment and thought, this is a group that should revolve around praxis much more than theory, because the praxis is the doing element of practice. So there's the think about it, do it. And
Was that video the Kurt Elling? That
sure
Kurt Elling
was.
video.
Oh man, I recommend that to anybody. Kurt Elling with Kenny Banks Jr. on the keys, doing "George on My Mind" at the 2019 piano performance conference or whatever. It's incredible. It's one of the best performances of music I have ever heard. It's phenomenal.
Wow.
So,
all right. Well,
that's her name.
that's some pretty cool info. So let's jump into before we get into specific things about your performances, especially this past convention, which I'm sure we'll talk about. So I'm just wondering, what is the motivation behind you guys have a lot of part switching, mostly with lead and tenor, obviously, and I've also seen some performances with Lance on tenor too. So it's like it jumps around. So I'm wondering, it happens much more than other groups. What's like the motivation behind that? What brought you guys to feel like you should be switching parts all the time and still working great out just as well every time?
It's fun.
Well, it's
That
a little more than that. In
yeah.
that we have there's so many strengths in this quartet as far as like what kind of vocal colors, what kind of interpretive storytelling, what kind of vocal choices are available. So we try to optimize to what is the biggest strength in what, and we've tried a lot of different things, and we've just found like we go for what is the highest success rate generally. Give and take some other stuff that we've tried just for the fun of it. But mostly it's just to highlight strengths. And a lot of stuff like was created for other quartets that have different strengths. So we try to find it within the configuration, make the configuration work for us.
Awesome.
And to that point, another, from my perspective, so other than the bass part, obviously, there's nothing that any of us can't do. And that's always really exciting to me. Like when I'm thinking of teaching tags to this quartet, like I'm constantly switching around parts, doing that optimization of I think this one should be a Lance lead, and then maybe have Lance or Kevin on lead, but definitely Francesco on tenor, and like that type of thing. I'm always thinking about, and I'm sure the others are too. Like we're all like huge tag people, so like that's like ground floor of in the lab, as it were. Of all right, you do this, you do that, and we'll use this short little bit to see what works, what doesn't work, and let's flip it around if it doesn't.
And with Lance being an in-house arranger for us, there is a bit of not chicken and egg, but cart before the horse, in that we can just decide, this tessitura, it only makes sense for Kevin to be on lead for this because he can do crazy astronomical explosive explosions, and it just makes sense for those kinds of stylistic reasons. So all of these choices, enter into how Lance imagines the arrangement to be. Sort of, there's a give and take process where we decide sort of, hey, this song, who would be best to deliver this message. So I can't say we've been super systematic about doing it all the same way for every song, because a lot of it is vibes.
Mm-hmm.
We're starting to, I think, get a bit better as we have, you know, been together for 2 years now, we're constantly learning about how we best operate together and what do we all need. And this is something that we've talked about recently after International, and trying to, you know, elevate our level and our experience of being together, our experience of rehearsing together. And so part of that is conversations about, you know, voice parts and finding the way forward. And so it's historically for song selection, it's kind of been vibes for who sings what. Part of it is Lance arranged it this way, and the tessitura makes sense for these voices to be this way and that. So it's sort of a mixed bag, so to speak.
Yeah, awesome. That's I feel like that's a really unique thing for you guys. 'Cause I feel like a lot of groups will, you know, it makes more sense to just sort of jump in and be like, I'm lead, I'm Barry, I'm whatever, and then sit there and then base everything off of that. But you guys have a really cool thing where you're like, I want to do this song, and like who should sing what on this song, and then figure it out from that. I think that's a really, really cool thing that I feel like it's probably going to happen a little more often now, just based on like the culture we're seeing of like people, you know, just being okay with doing whatever. Like I'll go to a tag thing and everyone's like, I'll just sing whatever part you want me to sing. And then it's like, you know, just whatever you feel like works best for the song. It's like, oh, that one has a B in it. I can't sing a B. I won't do that. But this one, it's A in it. That's totally fine with me. And then they'll just do that. So I think that's a really cool mindset you guys have. I think it really shows in your performances. So that's awesome. So I want to ask, this past convention, you guys, you know, placed best that you have, made it to the semifinals. I just wanted to know, what was that feeling to like be there in the quarterfinals and be like, hey, we're just doing this, trying to have a good time, and then you make it to the top 20. What was that like for any of you guys?
It was crazy. I've never felt anything like the performance side, but even before that, we felt really good about our quarterfinal set. I think even if we had made 22nd and not sung another note in the contest, we would have felt really great about what we did. And we had so much encouragement, but we didn't really have any expectations. A lot of our coaches were like, don't worry about, you know, where you place, whatever, that kind of stuff. And I think that got us in a good headspace of, we're not expecting to do anything, but if we do, it's really great. But we listened to the call off, obviously, because, you know, we were very interested in what could have happened. We were very interested to get our scores at the end. And then we hear, you know, 17, 18 quartets get called, and then we hear our name, and it's like the most unbelievable feeling that I think we've ever experienced.
There's a little processing time too, because last year, well, we didn't know if where we would place, because it depends, you know, there's a certain blindness you have on stage where it's like, I'm just performing now, I don't see what we are, you know, I don't experience that, I just experience what I'm experiencing. And last year they were in the middle of the call for the 20. I don't know where in the order it was, but we hear Praxis Street Power, and we're like, oh. So we had that this year. We had an extra buffer. Fran even asked, so which quartets start with that we need to be concerned about? And there was one.
There was primer.
Yeah.
Primer. So it was a little bit extra of oh, wow, cool. Plus the zero expectation thing. It was nice.
Yeah.
This is an interesting bit of lore of Praxis.
Please.
Most of the draws that we've had, or the two draws that we've had at International, I guess is more specific. We have come 2 after Sweet and Sour, and in the semifinals we were 2 after Sweet and Sour. So it was kind of like a complete coincidence that just like I felt it in that moment. You know, 2 after when Sweet and Sour was called, I was like, hey, if it's going to happen at any point, it's going to be 2 after Sweet and Sour. And guess where it was? Exactly 2 after Sweet and Sour.
SNS should have been B&B still.
Yeah, wow.
Dang.
So maybe someone can answer this question. When Sweet and Sour made the 20 for the first time, did they also, this will tie into making the 20. When they made the 20 for the first time, weren't they like, oh, we need to work on our 4th song now? They weren't, I don't think they were expecting to make it the first time they made it, and it was some group, it was either Sweet and Sour or someone else that in recent memory where it was like, okay, guess we're going to go rehearse for 36 hours after getting the call off. And
that's interesting.
So it was interesting. So, you know, we came in with 3 really polished tunes, I think, into that convention, and sort of we had understood that the primary two songs deserve the most attention leading up to, and that's what we spent time coaching 2 weeks prior at Harmony College East with all of our coaches. We spent almost all, if not all, of the time in our pods with just those two songs, and thank the Lord that we did, because it got. I mean, that feedback that we got, especially from Mo Field, helped us really get over the line in a big way. And so we sort of understood that, hey, if we make the 20, yes, we'll have work to do that day to get all by myself into shape enough to, because it was not ready.
It was not performable.
If it was not performable, if we had gotten called off and was like, okay, go on stage right now and sing it, no shot.
It took 3 hours to get it to a good spot the day before.
Yeah, we had to
Wow.
really block it out together, just to make sure that we're all understanding how this is flowing, and so we can talk through development and feeling and energy and all of those things in a bit more of a coherent way. And that was the day before we put it on stage, on the second round. So when we got called, I was like, this is incredible, but also part of my mind is like, okay, time to go learn a song, which, it was an interesting experience. It's one I'll never forget. Because I had dreamed of making the 20s since I was a kid, or since I was first in barbershop 11 years ago, because that was the next attainable thing, right? Making the 10, getting into medals is like, wow, can I ever do that? I don't know, but making the 20, kind of doable, but still really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And look who you have to beat in order to do it, So I always thought being in the audience, 2014 was my first international, 2015, doing the youth contest and seeing basically my heroes, legends on the stage, being like, wow, making the 20, you really make it in this hobby if you make the 20. And so for that to finally happen to us, and for people to come up to us and say, I knew it, you guys deserve it, like, this was awesome, you guys crushed it in the first round. It was a huge moment, but also I was like, okay, got to go learn a song now. So
Yeah.
I kind of couldn't really process what it meant until really, to be honest, after we got off stage on the semifinals. That was when I could really fully experience the moment, experience the joy, because we had just crushed it the second time too. I thought that we went on stage and did as well as it possibly could have been in the best way ever on the second round with Back at One and then all by myself. It was just max. We performance maxed it, as the kids would say.
Yeah.
And so it was that point we got off stage and we basically jumped into each other's arms with joy at what we had just done and the journey. And it was that point that I was like, okay, we're in the big time now, boys.
Yeah, one of our coaches was one of our coaches, Joe Cerruti, who's a good friend of ours. David is currently in his house, and
He has been letting me live here since February. Shout out to everyone that Joe is just upset. Joe Cerruti, you're the man.
yeah, he's pretty cool. So he was right off stage when we got there, and it was just the most inviting feeling. We saw him, we saw Scott Kitzmiller, we saw a couple other people that we had worked with, who were just elated to see us on that level of stage, and to where, again, without the expectation, it just adds so much more of that serotonin boost. And we got off stage just feeling, on top of the world. No matter what happened, no matter where the scores landed out, we felt like we were playing with house money at that point. And I think a couple people kind of said the same thing to us. We're just like, it just felt like you were out there just having fun, and that's where you want to be as a quartet.
Yeah, that's so awesome. I love to hear about that. So, you guys have such a wonderful and unique performance style that is like, I would say that it's like sort of pushing the boundaries of, the hobby and the contest especially. And it's a lot of it is so much based off of these like new, unique kind of arrangements, and also a lot based off of the a style that shows a lot more emphasis on like really high quality singing, and things like all a bunch of riffs and stuff, which are not very common in barbershops. I'm just sort of wondering that like, was the goal was that like sort of a goal for you guys to be able to have that kind of new, unique sound, or did it just end up happening, after singing a few of these arrangements, or was it like a conscious effort? What do you guys think?
I talk about this since I've kind of been the person that has inserted a lot of that.
He is him.
Yeah, it's sort of the musical elements that have come into, particularly my arranging, is just um, hearing the different things that happen within the quartet naturally. So when I've been singing with Francesco since right before the pandemic, as far as like in a serious quartet. Where when I first knew him, I just knew him as a great singer and a great singer of barbershop, and we were thinking, oh, we're just gonna sing barbershop arrangements. And then Francesco and I are talking about musical genres that we like and all that. And Francesco just starts like just like going into this R&B thing where it's like it's just perfectly put in. I forget what song it was, but it was just something. It's probably like Stevie Wonder or something like that. Because I know that's one of Francesco's favorites, where it's like it's just stylistically perfect. And we talked about quartets that have done historically that style of music, and what we feel like is lacking a little bit, and that there's a little bit of authenticity gap. And so we wanted to insert the elements that we felt like were really authentic to the style, and we kind of prioritized that as kind of what we thought our ideal arrangements would look like. And so we fast forward to 2020, around the time of the famous election with the vote recounts and all that kind of stuff. And Francesco sends me a meme of Brian McKnight back at one as the recounts were happening. Like, and I'll start back at one.
Yeah, it was the meme was the Nevada election recounters be like, one, you're like a dream come true.
Yeah.
And I thought that was the funniest thing, so I immediately forwarded it to Lance, and then I forwarded it to Lance with a bunch of with a bunch of eyeball emojis, with the side eye ones that are going like, but it's just the whole all of them meaning, hey, we could do this.
And then that night, and this was not for Praxis at all. This was not Praxis was not a thing at this point. But I said I already kind of have a skeleton of this arrangement. Would you want to get on a call and talk about it briefly? Briefly becomes now 4 a.m. and we've completely transcribed a melody and put chords underneath of it, and it's pretty much done, other than some slight editing things. But we spent probably 4 to 6 hours, probably 6 hours on creating Back at One. And once we created Back at One, the rest was kind of history. We were like, well, now we've done this thing, and now this is probably going to break the music category because they're not going to know how to judge it. And I think going forward from that, I was just trying to find things that felt authentic to the music rather than focusing so much on the barbershop style, and just letting the barbershop style come in naturally.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome to hear. I love about that story about Back at One. I think you might have talked about that last year's international about that, but that's so cool to hear that that's how it came about. So, wow. I want to talk about a few other of your arrangements. So, first of all, for me, the Aladdin song you guys did this past year, that sort of came out of nowhere for me, because I mean, I saw you last year and I was like, this group is awesome. They do these like super, like out there kind of arrangements, especially like Being Alive was one of my favorite ones of the contest last year. I was blown away by that. So when I heard you guys do the Aladdin song, it came out of nowhere and I was like, what is this? It's awesome, but I didn't expect it at all. So just wondering sort of what was the motivation behind that song and that arrangement, and specifically like the comedy aspect, because there was a lot that was really funny there, and I was like, if I like had like a bingo card, the Praxis doing comedy was not on my bingo card, but I was super happy about it. So like, how did that come about? Whose like idea was that? What happened there?
Yeah, as far as the song itself, we all decided it on a call where we were just discussing just general songs. We had like, I think we had 4 songs that we had cycled through, and 2 of them got arranged by me, and then I think 2 of the other ones, I don't know if they actually made it or not.
We had to shelve it for a while because
We shelved it for a while just because of it being a really difficult arrangement.
No, it's because another quartet in the district was doing it.
Well, we hadn't been competing yet. We weren't competing in the fall, so we weren't going to sing it no matter what.
Yeah, but there was this other quartet, rule number 1 in the Mid-Atlantic District, who did their own arrangement, which was awesome, and it made a huge killing. And because they crushed it so well with their version of it, I remember sitting in the audience at like a division contest or something, and I'm like, I must have been sitting next to Lance or David or Kevin at the time, and I'm like, well, guess we're not doing that anytime soon. And then they broke up.
Yeah, they broke up not a super long after. But basically, when the arrangement came up, it was just supposed to be Friend Like Me, and then we get to, can your friends do this? And I'm like, okay, what's happening here? I can do the rest of it. The rest of it's fine. But what do we do here? And I just thought about like what makes sense to this group that would work. And I'm like, what if we like insert? So we in rehearsal we kind of meme around a little bit, and like somebody starts singing a song just randomly that sounds like another song. So like, or something that's like inappropriate to style or whatever. And I thought, what would be like really inappropriate but really funny at the same time? And I thought, okay, can your friends do this? I'm feeling happy, I'm feeling sad, which is like a thing that in barbershop circles, like if you do that at like during an uptune, it's really funny because it's just so wildly different than what you expect. And I was like, okay, how can we capitalize on this? Maybe this isn't the reference, but maybe we kind of find stuff that does work that audiences will be like, oh, I know this thing. And then it became, okay, how is this funny in terms of the song? It's like, okay, inappropriate lyrics to it. So it's like, if using the first example was Happy Sad, that Quorum 2022 champ sings, where it's like, I'm feeling happy, I'm feeling sad, a little genie, a little lamp. And that kind of morphed later into what it was, which we went into Secret Best Friends, who had just released an album. And we were like, okay, Air Raid Warden, but it's the Air Raid Genie. So it's like, it's just like, it's juxtaposing the lyrics of, what the Genie would say, but it's now Genie, but it's a barbershop quartet.
And it's, playfully dunking on quartets that are also competing in this contest that we're doing this thing in now. So that's a kind of a big element in barbershop, especially this year, with the finals, with the quartet finals. I mean, I think 9 out of 10 groups or something like that did some comedic element, sort of ribbing, taking the piss out of some other multiple other quartets in the finals.
Yeah.
So we, this is just a thing that has been a thing for a long time in the hobby. I'd never expected it to be this. I never expected people to be leaning and dipping into it this heavily, but we were part of that, I suppose, this year, and so we did that to other quartets.
When I made it, it was after Spider Farm, but I had no idea that a bunch of quartets were going to try comedy. It was before First Take had even thought about doing No One Sings Higher Than Me. It was before. I mean, obviously, Newfangled 4 had been doing stuff for a long time. It was way before any other groups were really trying this at that level. So it's like, it's really interesting. It's like chicken egg kind of thing of like, I didn't really think it was going to be a comedy contest, but it ended up being a comedy contest by the time we got there.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome to hear about that story, about that song. That was such a fun one for me watching that. I was like totally pleased. Like, this is a super cool direction. I was not expecting it at all. I want to go back to Back at One, because I was wondering, for Francesco, this is sort of a cool story from my end, but when I was watching the semifinals, I was, like pretty much right in the middle, like really far back toward where the sound people were. So I could see everyone in front of me and then I could see you guys. And I remember seeing tons of people in front while you were singing that song, especially toward the end where there's a lot of, sort of crazy riffs and runs, things like that. And people are like during it, and that was super funny to read. It's like people like Chris Keogh from 3.5 Men. He was going crazy while you were doing that. He was having the best time ever. So I was wondering, what is it like for you to go on a stage and sing something like that, which is so like something that you don't usually see on the contest stage? What was like to be sort of a pioneer of that sort of sound?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's something I didn't start singing barbershop as a lead. It wasn't until I started singing with the reunion, that I started singing lead in the first place. So, but it's been at this point I've been singing lead for over 75% of my history as a barbershopper. So I guess I'm a lead now. Even though I still love singing the other two parts and will always sort of consider myself a tenor at heart. So singing lead has always been an uphill journey for me to, manage the instrument, manage how much I'm giving, how much, am I over singing? How do I deliver the message? How do I not look like a zombie face? Because I'm a very technically minded person. And so it's always sort of shocking to me that I think what I think it is as I've gotten better singing lead, the performance elements that people are paying attention to when I'm singing are less about the face and are more about the vocal choices. And I think that's to my benefit because it kind of bails me out in some ways. Because like I think I'm doing a lot of things better than I ever did when I was singing lead, 5, 6, 7 years ago with my expression and my what's going on here, but like not that differently. But what's different is like the people I'm singing with and the vocal choices we're making. And so I've the when it comes to singing lead, I don't know, I still think about it as in some ways similar to how I always thought about it, which is I got to know what's my function in the chord. Start there. You've got to start there. You got to know how to fill the chord, fill the sound, match the voices around you. Always have that ear for how to make this smooth and paint clean textures, across time, as I'm, likely to say all the time. And but in terms of the style and how do I feel being someone who's maybe pushing the envelope as a lead, it's just a matter of getting used to it. I've done that song. I've done these songs enough times where I don't have to, and I've been in front of people, especially in the Mid-Atlantic district, who are so supportive and encouraging, that it doesn't feel scary. It doesn't feel like a huge risk anymore doing that. So while it, like, if you compare it to, say, the quartets of 10, 15 years ago, wow, this is super risky, super adventurous, super ambitious. On my end, it's just something that was kind of encouraged out of me over time. And it's baby steps, right? I was never going to deliver that kind of performance 6, 7 years ago. Not because I didn't have the vocal ability at the time, but because the culture wasn't there, perhaps. And so I still think about it as a barbershopper in many ways. Tune the chord, do again, like I said, be smooth, don't do too much with my body. And I'm very pleased. I look back on the videos of us performing it, and like I always have idolized Theo Hicks, because I'm like, you watch that guy sing and he doesn't move. Yeah. He's not doing this stuff with his neck. His head and his body are staying in one spot, and yet he's delivering this compelling performance. And somehow I'm doing those things too now, right? And so it's like a nice thing to look at my performance with the critical lens on and say, you know, the technical things are there, and it's sort of reassuring that I can, I guess, not think about them while I'm performing, because you don't want to be you don't want to be thinking about those things while you're performing. You want to be in the story, and making the choices that make the most sense for how the music's moving you at that moment.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Oh, definitely. That's a ton more than I was expecting, so even better. So yeah, thank you for all that information. Cool. So just a few more questions. This is for Kevin mainly. So there are, you guys have two main. I mean, from my perspective, who I haven't gone to a lot of your shows up there. I'm not from that area, but it seems like you have two main ballads that really feature you on like the lead role in terms of being alive and all by myself, which is very new for this year, and it's been it's so thrilling to like see someone with the kind of sound that you have fulfill that lead role for such emotional performances and obviously really technically challenging performances. And people talk about it all the time. So I'm just wondering, what is it like for you, like mentally, physically, or emotionally, to prepare for things that are like that daunting? From someone like my perspective as a baritone, where I'm like, I see that and I'm like, that's never in the cards for me. So it's like, what kind of process do you go through to make sure that you're fully ready for things like that?
Sure. Yeah. I've thought a lot about over the past, I don't know, 10 years. Ever since there was this particular voice instructor I had in college that kind of put my ear to, here's the kind of like, here's how you should sing. Like for your own voice, this is how you should figure out how to sing. And so I've kind of that's been my main focus since then, is how to feel good about finding my voice and my range and my whatever. So I would say that's the number one in all the prep that I do, is finding that comfort still. I think of the four of us, I'm probably the least technically minded. For me, it's a lot about kind of headspace and finding the default and doing it consistently, I guess. Um, so yeah, and then in prep, the hardest hurdle I've had these past since joining Praxis, I think, because I've done lead in the past, but never quite so seriously, never quite so exposed as with singers like this. And there's a lot of work I had to do on and still is, right, from my own expression. I'm a community theater actor, and I need to figure out how to do this and keep my centering without being too technical about this is my vocal norm, this is my vocal comfort, and not think about that just being it just happening, like Fran said. Like I didn't notice I was doing it differently. It just is there now, and I think that's my goal in prep. Plus, yeah, finding emotional hooks to hook onto for the big important songs.
Yeah.
One thing I'll speak about in regards to how I've arranged specifically for Kevin is, I've just heard him do things and I'm like, I want to go that extra mile of like that extra push that I can hear. And it's like, I hear him, just randomly being able to scream up to a C and like do
things that only he can do, basically.
Yeah, like it's super easy, like Alex Corson level of ease. And so I'm like, well, what's the next step after this? And then it's like, okay, C sharp post and being alive, and it's like he still crushes it, and it's super easy. And I'm like, okay, well, if that's easy, what could we do this in the Celine Dion key? It might not work, and we might have to pitch it down, but like then we do it for the first time, and it's like, again, it's really easy and really comes out freely, and I'm like, that's just dumb. I don't know what else. I can't go. I'm not going to go further than this. This is like outrageous, and a bunch of people. I was just at Harmony University, and just about everyone that came up to me just started screaming all by myself to me. One, because I was there by myself. My quartet was not there, and then two, like it just impacted people enough that people were like, "I want to scream this at you because I loved it so much."
Yeah. No, thank you both. That's really awesome. I mean, yeah, for me too, watching that, I was there with my mom and we were both in tears at the end of that. So it really definitely got the impact I think you were looking for. Unless you didn't want people to really like it, then in that case, you did not get it, but I'm pretty sure you wanted people to like it. So, and you definitely did. So, super awesome, and I'm thrilled to have been there for that. So, this is for David. We had I had posted a video online of you guys singing "I Believe I Can Fly" and did that transcription analysis. And you had wrote like a little story about it, and I just wanted you to be able to, not everyone saw that. I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about that arrangement because it's a super awesome arrangement. Like I talked about in the tag analysis video, that was such like an interesting, cool sounding tag. I never heard anything like it before, so I just had to transcribe and find out what's going on. So I just wanted to hear what you have to say about like the story behind that and what it was like for you arranging for this kind of group, or arranging for a different group, but having this group perform it. What was that like?
Well, so I did arrange that for the final year of the competition lifespan of the youth quartet, the Tune Squad, and they had wanted to have uh, the song from Space Jam because they have the name from Space Jam.
Hmm.
So originally they were going to have um, Will Bachman arrange it, and they eventually had Cole Kitzmiller do a medley of SpongeBob songs that some people might remember. Um, and
Most
they originally
expensive song in the history of
they
barbershop.
paid like $3,000 for that chart,
Wow.
and mine was free. Um, so split the difference. Um, but uh, they eventually, I was their first idea was to have me do the SpongeBob medley, and then they thought better of it because I told them, "Wait, I have some good ideas for I Believe I Can Fly." So they gave me that project, and they gave SpongeBob medley to Cole. Um, and the original recording of I Believe I Can Fly is like 7 minutes long, and like has super involved stuff. So I thought, okay, I can't do this full thing unless it were to be for like chorus plus soloist plus
Hmm.
quartet plus, like, to make this a contestable quartet thing, I gotta cut a ton of stuff out. Um, and uh, we can go like really into detail of all of the decisions I made later, but uh, so they ended up not singing that because they replaced their lead in the few months coming up to the contest, and it just wasn't singing well for them. So they replaced it with something that was more standard and easier to do. So that chart was just kind of sitting for a few years, and uh, when we had had the conversation about starting Praxis, um, and the B&B had already been doing the R&B idea. So Back at One had already been arranged, and they had taken "Drown in My Own Tears" and done like significant modifications to that. I thought, well, I have an R&B song that I have just sitting in the chamber. Let's give it a try, and that's how we started in on that. And then we even made more significant, not necessarily arranging modifications, but part swaps to maximize impact. Um, and so the tag specifically. So when you said you wanted to figure out what was going on in the tag, do you mean like just at the post?
Oh, well, yeah, that was because like that was a just for me because I was like I need to see what's going on, so that's why I transcribed it. But you have any stories in terms of like
Absolutely.
how just like what you were thinking? You don't have to go into extreme detail, but like sort of what you were thinking when you're arranging, it, like what made you decide I'm gonna go this route instead of like 5-1 or whatever. Go a little more on this side. What made you do that?
So uh, the reprise in the original is like a very gospel style shout chorus, and it's hyper triadic, hyper diatonic. Like it's just this is the thing that comes out. This first off the top extemp. This is church singing. So like I tried to echo that in the top of the shout chorus, like at the key change, the have that big climactic thing. So the reason that I have the pick, I believe I can fly, like have the triads moving in
Mhm.
sort of gospel style. That's why I had that to evoke the choir behind us. Um, And after the big climactic moment before the huge nadir before the rising action to the tag, um, the thought process there was more or less just the clouds opening up, uh, inviting you that you believe you can fly, I believe you can fly too. And so like the structure moving upward so that it is flying. And at the post part, I based the um, borrowing from the parallel minor off of Cole's arrangement. It's a lovely day today that he did for Quorum, because I liked that effect for still having that rising but more tension, and it's not resolved yet. Um, and I wanted to add in more tension, um, for so doing only things resolving by step and moving by step. Um, and the reason I went like Music School 101 5-1 at the end was because so that this is limitation being the driving force of ingenuity. So the base of the quartet, the Tune Squads, said I cannot post, but I really wanted a post, so I said okay, I'll interrupt your post for the classic heavens opening up moment, uh, so that it can still have the effect of a post, but you can breathe and re-articulate the post, and it can still be like a moment of the sublime in the mundane.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Thank you for all that.
If I could say, I love that moment when the bass post disappears and it's just the five triad at the top, because I'm on the third and thirds are
Yes.
based, and
There's actually comments on the transcription video about that moment and your tuning of it.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's my favorite moment in that whole song, because it's like pieces are falling in and we're working up to 5, and then it's just us for a second.
11th that this like or his 13th that like comes out of the blue, where the post is kind of being interfered by the 13th up top, but then the bass cuts out and then it's a psh, because also Kevin resolving up to make that 5 triad above. It's just like that tension resolution moment is it's really fabulous.
Yeah.
And another reason that I opted to, I probably would have taken the post out anyway at that moment, even if Dean could post, because like all of that vocab leading up was like towing the line of what's acceptable, but like having a penultimate a 5/1, I was gonna like post on the 11. I don't think so.
Yeah. That's a good point. Cool. So just one last question before I get to some final closing things. Lance, I was wondering, because there are so many things from your arrangements that are just so cool, and as someone who I do a ton of arranging, it's like really inspirational to see someone who like does a bunch of in-house arranging. I mean, pretty much almost, I mean, all the songs you did contest this year were all arranged by you, right?
Yeah, this year definitely.
Yeah.
I guess the last 2 years, because we did 2 of mine last year. Just
Yeah.
one.
I helped
yeah,
with one of them.
Yeah, I remember that. So I was wondering, for your arrangement style, it's kind of, this is a little more specific, but you've done something very cool, which I think I don't see a lot of people doing, where you're incorporating a lot of a lot of things and melodies that are way more on the contemporary style, where the melodies will not just have like one note, and it'll be like oh, and then you'll write that in the lead, and the baritone will go oh, like they'll flip it, and you do that so often in your arrangements, especially like when Fran is on the lead and doing songs like Back at One and One Last Cry, and those have so many moments where there's a lot of movement in there, and then you'll flip that in other parts. I feel like, I mean, there's all sorts of lead baritone flipping ever, but like the way that you do it, where it's specifically in the melody and you're leaving it just like the original does it, whereas a lot of arrangers will, simplify the melody for barbershop. So what sort of, is that something you thought about like consciously, like I want to make that decision to change the way that arranging styles are done? Because I think it's super cool. Like what are your thoughts behind that kind of thing?
Yeah, thanks for asking. That kind of goes back to knowing the quartet. This is something. It's been really interesting, specifically to talk to judges about how they've experienced our performances, and they kind of have gotten to know us over the years, and they kind of recognize that it's not a thing where it's a thing where, like, if any other quartet were to do some of the things that we do, it might not work over as well. So it's kind of like, I know my quartet well enough that I can go and do something that's not conventional to barbershop and have it go pretty well. I mean, be executed at a pretty high level. As far as how it came about, what I have done, particularly with stuff I've arranged with Francesco on lead, is I have gone on calls with Francesco and say, hey, what are you going to do here, 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 here? And we kind of go methodically through the song so that I know what I have to avoid in a lot of cases. Because you can get into kind of a trap, arranging wise, where you can kind of noodle and pretend that you know what's going to happen with the melody, and then you could arrange it, and then you hear, oh, okay, there are these dissonant spots that we're not really too proud of here. And then it takes time out of the rehearsal to try to iron those out. So to kind of cut out the middleman, I just went to Francesco and said, hey, what is your ideal kind of melodic contour here, so that I can get out of your way?
Yeah, and sometimes sometimes it makes sense to avoid doublings, right? To have lead most of the time it's lead baritone, but
Yeah.
I can't say for sure whether that's 100% of the time. It's probably lead tenor swaps or lead bass flippy flops and stuff like that. Sometimes it makes sense stylistically to do those avoidance of doublings, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it makes sense to leave the doubling in because to avoid the doubling would harm the texture.
Yeah. It sticks out sometimes.
So it's sort of a value judgment, case by case thing where, we like to opt to preserve the lead doing what the lead wants to do here. If it's R&B, if it's a little a melismatic thing going on, sure, there might be some dodges, but there might also not be some dodges. If you look at the end of Back at One, then I'll start back if ever I believe my work is done. Lance matches me on the post there
Yeah.
for like a second, and that's an effect that we intentionally curated, so we could have made a more complete chord, complete in air quotes, but that felt complete to us because of the style. So
Yeah.
it's a bit of case by case.
Yeah, and as far as like some other things that we've done, like it's a lot of it is to match the style in which we're going for. With the Celine Dion tune, there's a little bit of that as well, where it's like there are kind of a little bit of scoops that go into that, and a lot of that we kind of have to texture in. A lot of the choices that I made was to kind of cut out some hum rhythm where there's a lot of activity, particularly in the melody, so that we're not like all articulating homorythmic 16th notes all the time, and also there's texture of instrumentation too, where I wanted this kind of do 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 do. I wanted that because that's a really key element of the song, at least to me, and I think a lot of people feel the same way. Where like if we're losing elements of the song for the sake of just having it be barbershop all the time, I feel like that misses the mark just a little bit, where we can have barbershop and the song coexist if we just know where we have to use both.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Awesome. I was going to say that something similar, which is that in barbershop historically, there is, sometimes there's a simplification of the melody in order to make it more accessible to whoever the song is arranged for, and so we like to sort of go the other way and say, how can we make barbershop come to this song rather than make the song come to barbershop?
Yeah.
And so it's sort of a radical commitment to trying to, like Lance said before, maybe 45 minutes ago, about authenticity and about staying true to the style. we'll engage in those conversations about, oh, do we avoid doublings here because I'm going to be doing this melismatic thing because I want to keep the melismatic thing. You know,
Mm-hmm.
most of the groups are not going to be attempting that, right? So, but and sometimes I listen to music in our hobby, and I'm like, and I note that it is a little too simplified in that way, but and then it draws me out because now I'm thinking about those choices rather than thinking about the story, and I'd rather so like you know you asked before about what was behind the choice of wanting to do all this R&B stuff, and what came to mind, I didn't say it, is because we can.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
And if we can and we like it, then we should.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that. I love that mindset. Um, cool. Just a really, really quick last thing. I just want to go around and just hear from each of you what like your top one, maybe two inspirations are for any part that you might sing, just whatever you feel most comfortable with, but just, just one or two most inspirational people and be like a really, really small thing about, what about them you've taken from their influence a lot. So how about David, we'll start with you.
Uh, Man, are you talking about specifically on the bass part or me as a
Yeah,
vocalist?
on the
Uh,
bass
on
part.
on the bass part.
Such an easy
Oh.
question.
Like I can tell you that as far as a soloist, I look a lot up to Kurt Elling,
Mm,
and not in my voice type, like a lot of Sam Cooke, because a lot of folks don't know, because I never get to sing anything other than the bass part, that I do live a lot more in my upper range when I'm a solo singer. Like I'm most at home doing solo jazz,
mhm.
um, and I do uh, extemporaneous melismatic stuff all over the place, and like that's when I am the happiest. So like I think like Stevie Wonder is another huge inspiration for me. But singing barbershop bass, man, uh, I like elements, of like Jeff Oxley was my first model when I first got into barbershop back in like '06. I really like Jason Van Hook, of Four Voices,
Mhm.
um, and the way he does that with his tone. Um, Really like the resonant presence of Martin Walgren. I try to emulate that occasionally. Um, Man, there are so many others.
Kyle Kitzmiller.
Oh, Kyle Kiss. I can only dream of doing what Kyle can do. He's just so all the time.
Mhm. Yeah.
But yeah,
Cool.
he Kyle's like my Mount Everest almost.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Kevin, how about you? Either lead or tenor, whatever you prefer.
Yeah, so I think I've one for each. Further ago, Drew Kirkman of Michigan Jake was suggested to me by David. Hey, listen to this guy. And I was like, yeah. I think I was singing not tenor at the time, so I don't know what I was doing. Uh, Whatever. Yeah, and then uh, more recently, I guess, 2015, was the first time I heard Round Midnight. It was also my first
Mhm.
international contest. But yeah, Wayne Grimmer as lead just was like a shining star in there for me. So I always look forward to hearing them still. And I look because there's something about, I don't know, something about the way he sings that I just want, yes, more of that, please.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Lance, how about you?
yeah, I mean, It's funny that Kevin brings up Round Midnight because they were one of the first quartets that I ever saw, and I was inspired by the fact that they did songs that were newer, and they were the only quartet at that time on that show that were doing contemporary songs. So I think I borrow a lot from them. I realized I listened to a lot of Musical Island Boys have kind of inspired me as of late because they were kind of doing what we're doing before us. They really kind of were our predecessors. Signature did quite a bit of that as well. And even Instant Classic as well. I know that they've been brought up as far as individuals who have kind of been on my journey the whole time. My kind of mentors that have kind of followed me all the way up to where I am are Tony Colosimo and Joe Cerruti. They were there at the very beginning of my barbershop journey. They encouraged me to do a lot of different things, and eventually they've been our coaches. So they've inspired me a lot. It was crazy to see Tony get his first medal in 2022, and then now 2023, 2024, now he's gotten up to second place. It's been really inspiring to see his journey, particularly because he was a person that I saw as just a person that was really encouraging to me and said, "You're a great singer. You should be doing more singing." And that just one of the things that kept me going. So, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. And lastly, how about you, Fran?
Yeah. As a tenor, I would say, and this might be a shocking choice for some, but it makes sense. Roger Ross. Dude is the master of color and about understanding the role of being a tenor singer and how the tenor, I always joke, tenor doesn't matter. But the tenor does matter in that the tenor colors the sound envelope at the top and can really change the mood depending on the choice that is made. And for Roger, one of the most in-tune tenors ever to do it, and just so sensitive and so selfless in many ways as a musician, to be just like whatever the music needs to be in that moment. So I always say, and to an extent, not to an extent, you brought up signature before, Lance, and Paul Saka as well. He has that same mindset of doing what the music needs. He adds a little bit more of that solo, smoky, soulful color, and so that sort of ties into us as a quartet too. So Paul Saka is one of those singers who has crept up my tier list, slowly but surely over the years, as I've really come to respect what he brings to the tenor position. As a lead, I guess I would say Rick Knight from the Gas House Gang. My first lead, still maybe the best lead for me.
Yeah.
Maybe number one for me. Just, again, so conscious of the history of the art form, what the lead can be, how accurate, how powerful, just the power and the dexterity too. You ever watch him on stage and he's like, but doing basically like kung fu up there, but you couldn't tell in his instrument because it's just so consistent and so rich and full of emotion and character, especially with the Gas House Gang, and also Kenny Hatton from the Bluegrass Student Union.
Yeah.
That I would say that Kenny probably is my most influential barbershopper for me in my development as a lead singer, because Kenny Hatton, if you listen to especially later Bluegrass Student Union's recordings in the late 80s, Jukebox Saturday Night, probably one of the most, maybe the best record in the history of barbershop, is that record. It's possible, it's hard to make those kinds of claims with definitiveness, but what Kenny does and the style and his understanding of the American songbook and of American music really comes forward in his delivery. He's very soulful. He's smooth. He's got rich people say he sings up here and is very forward, but you listen to him sing Stardust or
Liza.
or Liza or I Can Dream, Can I? And it's like, it's kind of impossible in a sense, where it's like, how could it takes many listens to really sit with what he's doing. One of the most amazing musicians in the history of the art form. And more contemporarily, I would say Josh
Yeah.
And he does things that no one has ever done.
Mhm.
And he's so good, he's so gifted technically, and I shouldn't say gifted, he worked for it, worked very, very hard, and you can tell that it's just immaculate. So those folks, Roger Ross, Paul Saka, Rick Knight, Kenny Hatton, Josh Salamayer are some of these are the guys that come to mind, especially as it pertains to us in this quartet and what we do.
Yeah. All awesome. Thank you so much. So this has been super awesome. I've been delighted to be able to talk to you guys. I think people are really going to love hearing all these sort of backstories about certain performances, certain styles, arrangements, and you as individuals. So thank you for coming on here. This has been a joy. Any last things you want to say to anyone watching?
Me searching the Rolodex for memes. Nothing's
All
coming to
right.
mind.
Yeah. Well, this has been a total joy. Thank you so much for being here, and everyone's gonna love this. Thank you so much to the audience for watching, and I will see you in another episode. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks.
you, Jason. See you, YouTube.